scales. And finally, I would argue they're committing the gambler's fallacy.
And that is?
Well, it's an argument of putting the creator in the cosmos. You use the analogy of flipping a coin. Say flip a nickel 100,000 consecutive times. If it comes up heads all 100,000 times, you'd be justified in saying the nickel has been designed to come up heads every single time.
I should say.
But if you're committing the multiverse fallacy, you would be arguing, well, maybe there's an infinite number of nickels out there being flipped by an infinite number of people, and if that's the case, mathematics tells us that at least one of those will come up with 100,000 consecutive heads by pure chance, and therefore they make the mistake of saying on the next flip there's a 50-50 chance it could be tails.
So I'm going to bet on the next one, huh?
Well, the fallacy is you're assuming that an infinite number exists, and where you have no evidence for that infinite number. And you're assuming that if there is an infinite number, that they're producing results distinct from the one that you're observing in front of you. And where the observable sample size is small, then you have to go with the conclusion that based on that small sample size, what you're seeing here is not chance, it's design. And finally, I would argue you can always look at both sides of the coin. I mean, again, I would say if someone who sees 100,000 consecutive heads coming up with a nickel being flipped, before you bet tails, look at both sides of the coin. And you can do the same thing with the universe. We can choose to observe the universe in more detail than we have so far. And literally every day astronomers are doing that. And in doing that, if we see that the evidence for design mounts rather than shrinks, that's really equivalent to proving you got heads on both sides of the coin. So in that sense, I would argue the multiverse hypothesis, as atheists propose it, is testable.
Okay. I'm not much of a gambler, but I wouldn't mind the infinite number of nickels, Hugh. So the bottom line is you still don't escape a transcendent cause then for the multiverse.
You not only don't escape the transcendent cause, which all multiverse advocates do admit, neither do you escape the conclusion that that causal agent's a personal being.
Personal being, okay.
And see, that really gets you down to the God of the Bible. He's not just a transcendent creator. He is a personal creator who has miraculously intervened for the specific benefit of the human species.
Great. Good stuff. Okay, that's chapter 14. How about the next one?
Next one, we're going to get into the court cases, because a lot of people have this idea that it's illegal to argue for creation in a public education or research endeavor, or even to bring up creation evolution in a context where you invoke the supernatural. So we're going to dispel that myth by looking at exactly what the Supreme Court and other courts decided on this issue.
All right, we'll take it out in court then on chapter 15. That's going to do it for this. We're going to court now. So this is an emotional topic for a lot of Christians, particularly because they have seen what can be termed as defeats in the public courts when it comes to creation and evolution. Maybe a place to start is with Thomas Jefferson's comment about a wall of separation between church and state. So doesn't that imply that these things need to be kept separate, Hugh?
Okay, that wall of separation between church and state is not in the Constitution.
It's not.
It is in an official letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote while he was President of the United States, so it does have considerable import, given the office in which he wrote the letter. But where he wrote about this wall of separation between church and state, it was a letter he was writing to a group of Baptist churches, basically assuring them that they had full rights granted by the Constitution for religious freedom to practice their Christianity in a Baptist context. He was reassuring them that they were not going to be superseded by the state stepping in and setting up a state denomination where everybody, say, in Massachusetts could no longer be a Congregationalist, they had to be a Baptist. And so he was assuring them this was not going to happen, that the government was going to practice the freedom of religious expression, and there wouldn't be any state mandate saying you must join this denomination, you can't join other denominations. And also note that he closed that letter off to these Baptist churches with a prayer to God the Creator. And therefore, I mean, you couldn't possibly interpret that Jefferson's intent was that we would keep religion out of the public arena. He was saying we can't allow one religion to trump another religion with state support. If that's going to happen, it's going to be because of free market competition amongst the religions and the denominations.
Okay. All right. Nevertheless, Hugh, there have been a number of U.S. court cases, and the rulings have gone against the public teaching of creation.
They've gone against the public teaching of creationism, and more specifically, the teaching of young earth creationism. They were not court cases against Christianity or against religion or against teaching creation. They were against the model put forward by the young earth creationists. And what's interesting in all the court battles, and I described the four most predominant ones into more than a theory, is that the justices or the judges pointed out that a false dichotomy was being set up. Basically, they were allowing only atheism to be presented along with young earth creationism and nothing else. And so they said this is a false dichotomy. They're making it look like there's no other alternatives. And, this is not granting people freedom of religious choice. It's granting them the freedom to choose between two positions only. And so they said for that very reason, we would have to rule against it. And which also you notice is that in all four court cases, the judges or the justices were reluctant to apply the First Amendment. That classic statement that the state is not going to rule against religion or force a religion. And
freedom of religion.
It's the freedom of religious expression clause that's in the First Amendment of the Constitution, is that they were reluctant to apply that until they first tried the credibility and the integrity of the young earth creationist cause. I mean, what I noticed in all four court cases, they made the statement to the creationists, why are you here? You already have the right to express whatever belief that you want to express in the public education arena or the research arena. But then they discovered that what they were presenting was something that didn't have any academic credibility or integrity. And so they said on that basis, it fails the scientific test. And if it fails the scientific test, then the only basis by which we can try it is on its religious grounds. And on its religious grounds, it violates the First Amendment of the Constitution. Why? Because it's only permitting one particular narrow denominational view on creation. It's not as broad even as Christianity. It's a small segment of Christian belief perspectives within the Christian community. Therefore, they said it violates the First Amendment. But the truth of the matter is the court justices would have never even applied that First Amendment if the creationists, the young earth creationists, could have documented that their position had an ounce of scientific integrity and credibility. But because it didn't, they were forced to try it on its religious grounds rather than its scientific merit.
So, Hugh, are you saying that despite the religious background of the person bringing the model, they are allowed to teach this model, provided it has scientific merit?
That's what the Supreme Court ruling from 1987 on this Balanced Treatment Act said. It said that the religious perspective of the scientific model being presented is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what this is. It wouldn't matter what the religious perspective was if these young earth creationists were bringing something into the public school classroom.
So you can come in talking about Jesus as the creator and all that, as long as your model has scientific merit?
As long as it's got some demonstrable secular merit. That's how the Supreme Court justices worded it. In other words, they have to have recognizable scientific merit. Now, it's not saying it had to be the most meritorious. It just had to document or establish at least some integrity